Hi there, Alex Long here, field agronomist for Beck's Hybrids here in northern Missouri, and I'm just wanting to talk about baseball-sized hail. It was a pretty significant storm, not widespread. The storm was really only a few miles wide by a few miles long, but it really impacted a lot of the corn and soybean fields in the area. So when you're out here assessing these fields, you really need to get a good idea of one, how much stand you have left, and two, how much defoliation there was. I did some stand counts. And I came up with about 10,000, 10 to 12,000, which obviously is not ideal. That's not what you're looking for. The reason for the stand reduction is this right here. So you look at this plant and it's severely injured right here. It took a hit from a hailstone. Like I said, they were baseball sized. It didn't take a lot, but a good square hit snapped this thing off a lot like it would green snap. When you look at the majority of the field though, you're seeing this. A lot of injury along the stalk. A lot of bruising along the plant, and then a lot of leaf shredding, and that's where the defoliation side comes in. So what you want to be able to do is take a really good estimate of how much defoliation as a percentage the field is. So in order to do that, you need to know what a healthy plant would have looked like in this field prior to the hailstorm. So this is about V12, V13 corn, and when you're picturing that, the canopies would have been about closed. You would have had good healthy leaves, big droopy leaves covering up the row spacing, and now we don't have that. So you need to be able to take that picture in your head and compare it to what you're seeing out in the field. And here, after doing that, you need to go to 3 to 5 different places in your field so you can get a good broad view of what's going on. And when I did that in this field, I'm coming up with about 70% defoliation. Now, what does that number actually tell you? Well, you take that number, and there's a chart that the crop adjusters use that compares leaf stage versus percent yield loss from defoliation. So at a 70% defoliation on V12 corn, you're looking at about 17% yield loss at this point. So you take that plus the stand loss, and you're going to have a serious reduction in yield. Now, that's not a total loss though. And when you're looking at this time of year, it's June 23rd. We don't really have the option to come in and replant corn. Planting beans isn't necessarily an option depending on your chemical program that you had down prior in the year. So some things that I wanted to point out that are going on in this field and what's going on in these plants now, the surviving plants, the ones that are still here, I want to show you what's going on in them. So as I mentioned before, you have a lot of injury, a lot of bruising. When you go into the inside of these plants and look at the bruising on the interior, as you can see, this bruise worked its way half to 3/4 of its way through the stalk. Now, you look at all this healthy tissue around here. You still have nutrient transfer. You're still putting on new leaves. So this thing's still actively growing, and that's what you're looking for. That's the most important thing, and that's why it's not 100% yield loss. That's why you still have an opportunity for some yield at the end of the year. One thing to think about is after you have this assessed and what's going to happen from this point forward. If you were planning on making a side dress application, you may want to adjust that depending on your yield goals to begin with. We're going to have about a 50% reduction in yield is what I'm estimating in this field. So you may want to either cancel that side dress or cut it back a little bit. You need to get out here and scout a little more because now this corn's in a severely stressed situation. There's an opportunity for insects and disease pests, bacterial pests to come in and really make a stand in this corn and really cause some issues later on. Now that always brings up another point. Should I spray fungicide on a field that has had hail on it? I'm going to go ahead and say no. So when you look at making a fungicide applications, you want to do that for a reason. You want to try to protect the plant, or you want to try to fix something that's going on in the plant right now. The fungicide is not going to help the hail damage. It's a physical damage. It's not going to help with that. It's also not going to help with the diseases that are a direct relation to the hail. So when you're looking at things like Goss's wilt or corn smut, a fungicide application isn't going to help those two diseases. It just doesn't have any kind of response to fungicide. And when you look at the other things that we're going for in this area, northern corn leaf blight, gray leaf spot, those things do have a response to fungicide. However, they don't vector in through the injury site. They're two unrelated things. One thing I will say is that scouting needs to be probably more intensive than it was before this event. Mostly because the corn's in a stress state and some of those things can show up later in the season and have more of a yield impact when you're already drawn back by the hailstorm. So I just wanted to do this quick agronomy update, give you an idea of what to look for in a hailed field, and just because it looks like it's the worst thing in the world doesn't mean that it actually is. Thanks.